The world in which The Witcher 3 takes place is arguably one of the greatest worlds in all of modern gaming, and I don't say this lightly. Of course, there are many incredible worlds in gaming. Just a few examples that come to mind are worlds such as the ones in Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Origins, and Skyrim, but for me personally, no world has given me as much immersion and, well, as much joy as the world of The Witcher 3 has. So, for today's video, I simply want to discuss all the places we go to in this game. Obviously, I won't be able to discuss every single place within this game, as this video will take hours, but I will try to discuss the key areas just to back up my point that I think The Witcher 3's world is so amazing. Although we start The Witcher 3 at the ancient Witcher's Keep of Kaer Morhen, I thought it'd be best to start this video by briefly discussing White Orchard, simply because I feel like it is in this area that our adventure in this game truly begins. White Orchard, at its very core, is trying to show us, the player, how the world this game takes place in is very much alive, but also in peril. We see this obviously through the dialogue. The story of this game is incredible and explains the situation fairly well, but we also see this through the environment. As we travel through this area, we see abandoned buildings and villages, we see windmills and sawmills, and of course, we also see the natural world around us, be that through the monsters we encounter, or simply through the trees and fields we must work our way through to reach our objectives. I mean, to go back to that other point, I just feel like this area does an amazing job of showing us how war has affected the world. For example, pretty much every building you go to shows the effects of war. Even the inn next to Wosong Bridge shows us how the Temerian lilies have been taken down, as White Orchard is no longer under Temerian rule. Think about the old fort, where the Nilfgaardians have set up a base camp. You can see the original structure of the fort, of course, but also you can see all the Nilfgaardians' tents and flags. And although these tents are fairly similar, there are a lot of unique details, like say the makeshift forging station, or the campfire where you can just see some Nilfgaardian soldiers sat around it. These details are really what I think brings these areas alive, and they are present in literally every aspect of the environment in The Witcher 3. Obviously, for today's video, I won't be able to list every detail and every unique little thing that has been done in the environment, but honestly, just from the visuals on screen, I imagine there is a lot that you can pick out for yourselves. I'm going to move on from White Orchard now, although there is still a lot that could be said about it. Simply because I have a lot of other areas to cover in today's video, I may consider doing individual videos in the future, going incredibly in-depth with each individual area, and what I think each area is trying to achieve, but this video is just meant to give you a basic overview of why the world of The Witcher 3 is so good. So I'll explain each area, but just the basics of each, and hopefully just from the visuals on screen, you can get a good image of just how expansive this world is. After finishing White Orchard, we are introduced to a fairly small area, at least in comparison to some of the others in The Witcher 3. This area is the palace in Vizima. Now, the palace in Vizima is actually an area that you go to in The Witcher 1, and The Witcher 3's version has pretty much the exact same layout, except there are a few extra areas within the palace. But what I wanted to talk about in this area is yet again just some of the small world-building details. One small thing I noticed in this palace is that you have some, I suppose they could be masons, digging up some Temerian artwork on the floor. You can also notice that all the armor sets lining the halls that were once Temerian, at least in The Witcher 1, are now Nilfgaardian armor sets. I mean, I'm sorry for constantly coming back to this point, but definitely, for the earlier areas of this game, you get this awesome blend of Nordling architecture, with Nilfgaardians just plastering their stuff all over it. I personally think that the game is trying to show us how in wars that involve empires capturing territory for their empire, cultures and ideals are just, in a way, removed, and then just replaced with a completely foreign culture. And I just love how we aren't really explicitly told this, at least this early on. on. We can just see it from the world around us, which is so cool. Obviously, there is a lot more to say on this area. For example, all the minor, pretty much unknown characters in the main hall just talking to each other about worldly events, as well as stuff like maps just showing us the state of the world. But as I will constantly be reiterating throughout this video, I'm just going over the basics, so let's move on to the next area. The next area we go to in The Witcher 3 is Velen. Velen is massive, and just for simplicity's sake, I will count Velen as everything except Novigrad in that segment of the map, even though obviously places like Oxenfurt are technically in Redania, and pretty much just anything north of the Pontar, but it just makes my job a lot easier to refer to anything in that segment of the map that isn't Novigrad as just Velen. I mean, actually, just for a little bit of interesting lore, I believe that Velen is an area in the north of Temeria that is controlled by Nilfgaard, and pretty much everything across the Pontar is Redania, so that includes places like Oxenfurt and Novigrad, although Novigrad is technically not under the rule of Radovid as it is a free city. The area of Velen itself is arguably even more war-torn than White Orchard, simply because at this point in the game, White Orchard was pretty much controlled by the Nilfgaardians, but Velen and the surrounding area is not completely under Nilfgaard's control yet, and there will be the occasional border dispute between the Redanians and the Nilfgaardians. Some of the key areas and details that come to mind about this area are of course the main bits of it, like say Crow's Perch, the massive Nilfgaardian camp in the south, Crookback Bog, Fyke Isle, or even the Elven Cave you explore with Caremon, but as I'm sure most of you that have played the game will know, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There is an almost unbelievable amount of detail and hidden things within Velen, some of which you only come across by doing secondary quests, and some of which you only come across by pure chance. For example, you have places like the Sylvan's Cave, or Arameus' abandoned manor, and the cave system underneath that. I mean, as I said before guys, the small details and individual areas are far too expansive to fully get into, but hopefully the visuals on screen will just give you a full idea of the sheer scope and detail of the environment in this game. I mean, you even have peasants just washing their clothes when you travel through the little villages in Velen. This has no reason to be there other than just to make the world feel alive. Almost every building you see in this game, at least the, well, interesting ones, are buildings that you're able to go into, and all without loading screens. For example, in Velen, one minute you can be in a boat traveling through marshland, and the next you can be pulling up on the shore and then entering a cave, tracking a monster's whereabouts, and all without a single loading screen, of course unless you fast travel. Consider a game like Skyrim, or even Fallout 4. I know Skyrim is 4 years older, and Fallout 4 is a year older, but they have loading screens pretty much every time you enter a building, but The Witcher, other than when you fast travel, has none. So, the fact that you can walk through these incredible environments in this seamless way is just amazing. I would say that if you're playing the game chronologically, Oxenfurt is the first place you go to where you get a real idea of this game's scope. And what I mean by that is before Oxenfurt, you have definitely been to some cool places, but most of the areas are just simple villages, and even Crow's Perch to an extent is just a slightly larger village. It is still of course an awesome place though, and I'm not taking anything away from that, I just think Oxenfurt is just on another level. Oxenfurt and the surrounding outskirts shows a fairly large and populated area, with shops and even a proper barbers. You can travel across bridges to get into the town, and then walk through cobbled streets, seeing children run around playing and a bustling marketplace. Obviously you see children and markets throughout your early travels in the game, but for me Oxenfurt just gave me this great contrast of how similar things like this can feel completely different depending on the environment around you. Oxenfurt is quite clearly a town, and the people there are quite clearly from the town, but with somewhere like a simple village deep in Velen, you can tell that they're, for lack of a better word, simple peasants. This honestly just helps transport you, the player, into this world, and I would say that that is probably one of the key jobs of an RPG. To conclude with Velen, and I guess anything in that segment of the map not including Novigrad, you have creepy mysterious boggy areas like Crookback Bog, simple villages, a not so simple village, i.e. Crow's Perch, and a full-on town, i.e. Oxenfurt, and also loads and loads of other areas that honestly I just can't get into fully. Some that I can just quickly say are places like Roach's hideout in that cave, and just any of the amazing caves and the forests and the monsters, and just there's so much in this world that it's almost impossible for one person to know and cover for all of it. Novigrad is the next area that I want to talk about, because although it shares the same area of the map as Velen, it very much deserves a segment in itself. I remember the first time I saw Novigrad in The Witcher 3, it would have been back in 2015, and let me just say that I was blown away. Before going to Novigrad, the main large-scale fantasy cities that stood out to me were Solitude in Skyrim and Vergen in The Witcher 2, but let me just say that I think Novigrad puts both of these cities to shame. And just to quickly say again guys, I know these games are older and the technology and budget may have not been there to make something on the same scale as Novigrad, but still, if you compare them, Novigrad clearly comes out on top. Novigrad as a city is sectioned off into many different districts. These districts being the Bits, Far Corners, the Fish Market, Glory Lane, Gildorf, the Harbourside, Hierarch Square, Laceholes, and I guess the Putrid Grove within Laceholes, Silverton, and Temple Isle. Some of these areas aren't exactly massive, but some are pretty big, such as Far Corners, which is basically the outskirts of Novigrad, and Temple Isle is also pretty big. And although they don't have a specific name in Novigrad, there are the sewers in Novigrad, which I would count as almost an area in themselves, as they go through large sections of the city and they're fully explorable, so they're pretty cool. But anyway, all these areas combined together make what we know as Novigrad. As you can imagine, this makes the city itself pretty big. From the visuals on screen, you should be able to get a basic idea of the sheer size of this city. The minute details within this city are of course incredible. You can see so much going on, be that thieves stealing from unsuspecting targets, children running around playing, people playing musical instruments, and also of course the actual buildings and areas within the city itself. There is simply, as is the case with literally every area in this game, too many details to get into. Honestly, I think making a video discussing everything in Novigrad would take hours, just because there is so much there. You can see posters on random walls throughout the city, cobbled streets with almost hidden alleyways leading to other hidden areas of the city. I mean, beneath Temple Isle, I believe there is even a hidden cave holding the Mad Witcher keyring. The marketplace in Novigrad is of course bustling with people, but also you don't just see the general goings-on you would expect within a city. You see cultural and religious goings-on as well. For example, you can see that the Church of the Eternal Fire's influence is everywhere, along with of course the influence of Radovid's witch hunters, be that through the burning pyres, or just through the priests performing sermons to the inhabitants of the city. Although, as with Velen, there is so much more I could say on this area, I think you all probably have a good idea of what I'm getting at with this segment. What I'm getting at being that Novigrad has managed to become an almost entirely self-contained individual and unique area itself, with its own culture and goings-on, despite the fact that it shares the same world space as Velen. How many games can you say manage to do that? I could name a few, but what you also have to consider is that The Witcher takes place in a world that is not ours. The map and cultures within it, although inspired by our world, are still unique to that world. And for me, it feels real. Partly because of how real and alive places like Novigrad feel, and partly because of all the other awesome aspects of the game, such as the music and just audio in general, the story, including small quests and large, and many other aspects. I mean, isn't it just incredible that a video game can accomplish this? Skellige Er is the next area we go to, which for me, at least in the base game of The Witcher 3, is the place that I feel is most unique, at least out of all the bigger areas. And also of course, each area is unique in its own right, but for me, as someone who lives in England, it's kind of like the first few areas of The Witcher 3 are similar in the way different areas of England are similar. Say if you went to a town in England and then went to a city, they are massively different, but you can still draw a lot of similarities between the people of each place and the general environment of each place. But going to Skellige Er, for me, felt like moving from England to Scandinavia. There is instantly a very clear and different culture in the new place. Just to quickly interject, I know that The Witcher is not meant to be based in England. I'm just using the England example as I live there, and it's easier for me to explain how it felt for me personally moving from Novigrad to Skellige Er using that analogy. In Skellige Er, we almost immediately notice the difference in the Skelligans, just simply because some Skelligan pirates attack the ship Geralt is trying to get to Skellige Er on. As for the environment, which is what this video is about, it is simply breathtaking. Skellige Er is an area consisting of loads of separate isles, each of which you can visit and explore. Each of these isles is covered in many natural things like mountains, forests, and caves. There is also, of course, the fact that the buildings have completely different architecture, and the overall layout of the towns is quite different to the towns in the northern kingdoms. For example, think about a place like Kaer Morhen. You simply do not see a place like that in the Novigrad Velen area of the map. You do still see awesome things in those areas, but what I mean is that places like Kaer Morhen show us the Skelligan culture, and buildings showing this culture can be seen all across Skellige Er, and I would say that they are unique to that part of the Witcher world. I also love the fact that even in Skellige Er, elven ruins can be found. The elven ruins are actually awesome in general in this game, as in a sense they link together all the areas with the underlying theme that despite all the humans have built in this world, most of what humans have built was on the back of the elves. And if you go even further back, in some cases the Vran. I also love how each of the isle's main villages or towns is themed with whatever clan owns them, be that the unique NPCs wearing their clan's emblem, or just the ruling clan's emblem being plastered across a lot of the general places in those areas. I feel like the Isle of Undervik needs to be briefly talked about in itself, just because of how unique it is compared to the other isles. Undervik is an isle in Skellige Er that recently, at least when Geralt arrives in Skellige Er, was ravaged by an ice giant, and when we go there, clearly you can see the effects. One of the main parts I remember about this isle was in fact walking into the house where the giant had decided to keep food stored. It was simply chilling. Skellige Er is also of course filled with a lot of little details like all the other areas that hopefully you'll be able to notice just from the visuals, as honestly, as with the other areas, there are simply far too many details to draw attention to. But to finish off the Skellige Er segment of this video, I just want to quickly say something about the Garden of Freya. And the reason I think the Garden of Freya shows one of the best uses of how CD Projekt Red have made their environment of the game feel so alive is that initially when you go there, it's this amazing garden. Obviously it has a werewolf in it that's killing people, but if you take that away, the garden still looks amazing. But after Yennefer performs black magic, the garden begins to wither, and at least chronologically in the game, you can never go back to the garden and have it look as nice as it used to. And isn't it just amazing that a video game does that? I just think it's so cool. Kaer Morhen and the valley surrounding it, although not quite as big and bustling as some of the other areas we go to in this game, is definitely an area that provides us, the player, with such an incredible contrast to everywhere else we've been. Kaer Morhen is situated in a valley, and the opening shot we get of it effectively shows us the sheer scale of this fortress. Kaer Morhen, like the palace in Vizima, did actually appear in The Witcher 1, however in The Witcher 3, Kaer Morhen as a whole is expanded upon massively. And I don't mean the fortress itself. In The Witcher 1, I would say that the fortress as a whole is actually bigger, but definitely less refined. What I mean is that in The Witcher 3, the Kaer Morhen area as a whole really trumps The Witcher 1, just because of the valley located outside of it. In The Witcher 1, it is possible to enter the Kaer Morhen Valley, similar to how you can in The Witcher 3, but you cannot explore nearly as much of it as you were able to in The Witcher 3. The valley contains abandoned watchtowers, caves, forests, and many other unique things. I believe you can even find a few dead salamandra that got lost during the attack on Kaer Morhen in The Witcher 1, which I think is just so cool. The Keep of Kaer Morhen is also amazing and contains so many little details. To name a significant one to me, there is actually a poster of the Witcher George you can interact with, which I just think makes this world feel so much more alive. Honestly, it's true what they say. It's the little things that really help. There is also the courtyard of Kaer Morhen, which contains, well, exactly what you'd expect a group of monster hunters to keep: training equipment. And as I've been saying this whole video, there is just so much you can talk about with each of these areas. But I'm starting to get a little conscious of how long this video is gonna be, so as not to bore you, I'll move on from Kaer Morhen and discuss some of the final areas of the base game. For the final part of today's video, I'll be discussing all the areas we go to involving avallac'h in some way. I will go over each of these areas briefly and then conclude. After Kaer Morhen, the next area we go to is the Isle of Mists. The Isle of Mists is one of the smallest unique areas we go to in this game, but like every other area, it is filled with various things that just make it awesome. For example, it is surrounded by shipwrecks, and there are even the remains of a few ships on the land. One thing I always remember is the dwarf, who was clearly part of the original dwarven crew, who got lost on the island, and he can be seen next to a chest in one of the larger caves of the Isle's cave system. I just think it's details like this that add to the world as a whole. Also, of course, the lighting of this area is very good. It genuinely feels, at least to me, like a place you shouldn't really be, if you get my meaning. For the final unique areas of the base game, I want to group together a few, simply because we aren't in these areas that long. What is crazy though, is I could yet again make entire videos on these areas, but I'll just briefly discuss each of them. When traveling with avallac'h through various worlds, we encounter a few minor worlds that aren't really worth going into in this video, but we also encounter what I would say are 3 really interesting areas that stuck out to me. The first is the Didderwet Desert, the next is the Ice Plains, and the final world is of course elle. The Didderwet Desert shows us the remains of an ancient civilization, but also, of course, a large desert that we later find out was once a large waterbed. Honestly, I imagine all of you watching will feel the same, but when I first went to this world, I was blown away by just how vast this world seemed. There are rock faces that appear to be miles away, and yet again, loads of details everywhere. I felt the same when ending up in the world that had been destroyed by the White Frost. I love how as you navigate your way through this environment, you are damaged by the sheer cold of the snow. Each building is destroyed and barely functional, but still underneath all that snow, you can make out that this place was an area in which people used to go about their lives. Finally, we go to elle, the world inhabited by the elle race of elves. We don't get to explore that much of it, but I think many would agree that the view of elle alone was incredible. You could see how different and arguably more sophisticated the architecture of the elle elves is. My main memory from this area is of course that view, but more specifically, I remember the great waterfalls that were below the city. Honestly, to me, it felt reminiscent of Rivendell in Lord of the Rings. There's also the Palace of Awakening, which is the area we actually get to walk around in, which is fit with various gardens, and of course, Gelel's painting an elf nude. The reason I've talked very basically about all the areas in the Witcher 3 base game is simply so I was able to justify my conclusion that these areas, when all combined, well, even individually, make this world feel so alive and incredible. In all honesty, I would go as far as to say that what the Witcher 3's worlds managed to accomplish is akin to a modern masterpiece, at least in gaming. How many other story-based games give you that much variety and detail in your adventure simply in the places you are able to go? I couldn't name many. A lot of games' in-game areas feel very similar throughout the entire journey, but with The Witcher 3, as you go through your journey, every time you enter a new area, you can tell simply from the world around you that you're in a different place. For me, this world that you get to almost live in and experience is one of the biggest reasons as to why The Witcher 3, at least in my opinion, is one of the greatest games of all time. A few honorable mentions about this game's world that I simply did not have time to fully get into are the fact that there is so much variety in even the underwater areas of the map, be that in some Skellige shipwreck, some cave, or even a filthy canal in Novigrad. The NPCs and how they are in general, although I didn't get fully into them as this video is more about the environment than the NPC interaction, the day and night cycle and how well the devs managed to implement time skipping, and I guess just to reiterate again, all the minute details and little things that help make this world feel so alive. One more thing I thought I'd mention before ending today's video is that I have purposely left out all the areas added in The Witcher 3's 2 DLC. I did this because I think in all honesty, the areas added in each DLC could warrant entire videos in themselves. I also didn't want this video to be too long, and I feel like discussing how the world of this game was at release is probably better just to start with, instead of incorporating stuff you have to pay for on top of the base game. Anyway, thanks for watching today's video everyone. I'll be away now for around about a month, as quite simply I'll be far too busy this month to make videos. I just thought I'd let you all know. In all honesty, I did plan to do just a simple lore video today, but as I'll be gone for a month, I thought I'd leave you all with something a little bit more, I guess, special. I did talk about making videos like this in my The Witcher 3 is Incredible video, and a lot of you seem to want more, so I hope you've enjoyed, and as I said, maybe I'll do more videos like this in the future, discussing all the aspects of the game, and maybe even individual videos on the individual areas, so I can just go a bit more in depth. So say an entire video on Velen or Novigrad. Anyway, I'll leave you all with the Patreon pledges, who honestly have just been a great support in making today's video happen. If you want to see more videos like this, of course subscribe, and also like the video, just to let me know that you liked it and want to see more. But anyway, I'll see you guys soon.